He thought he had destroyed me. He thought the story was over, but what he didn't know was that I had one last move. A move that would change everything, forever. The voice in my head echoed like thunder in an empty room. It was the truth, my truth. For a long time I had let him write my story. Every decision he made, every lie he told, every mask he wore. It was like he held the pen, and I was just a character in his twisted game. And when he betrayed me, when he tore apart everything I had built with my bare hands, he laughed. He laughed like my pain was nothing more than a joke, like my tears were just another victory for him. He thought the book was closed. He thought the story had ended with me broken, defeated, forgotten. But endings aren't always what they seem, because what he didn't know was that I wasn't broken, I wasn't finished, and the story wasn't his to end. It was mine. Do you know what it feels like to be underestimated? To have someone look into your eyes, smirk, and believe that you're too weak to fight back? It burns. It carves a wound deeper than any blade. It makes you question yourself and who you are, what you're worth, whether you'll ever rise again. But that's the dangerous part. Because when you underestimate someone, you give them the perfect chance to strike back, and that's exactly what I did. When I close my eyes, I can still hear his voice. So confident. So arrogant. His words like poison dripping into my ears. It's over. You'll never rise again. Without me, you are nothing, for a moment, maybe even for days. I almost believed him. But then something inside me shifted. I realized that every betrayal carries a hidden gift. A lesson, a weapon, a fire. And the fire he gave me was rage. Not the kind that blinds you, but the kind that sharpens you, focuses you, molds you into something unstoppable. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry in the shadows. No. I was going to rise. And when I rose, he would see a version of me he never believed existed. A version that would bring his entire world crashing down. You see, revenge isn't always about anger. Sometimes it's about silence. It's about waiting, watching, calculating every move, every weakness. It's about patience so sharp it feels like ice in your veins. Because when the time comes, when the curtain finally falls, the one who betrayed you will never see it coming, and he didn't. He never saw me coming. I remember the night I made my decision. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your thoughts sound like screams. The stars above me looked cold, distant, almost mocking, but as I stared at them, I whispered to myself, this isn't the end. This is the beginning. That was the night I took back my story. That was the night I stopped being the victim and started becoming the storm. So when I tell you he thought he won, I mean it. He believed the chapter was closed, the ending already written. But the truth is, the ending you're about to hear, the ending that shook his world, the ending that turned betrayal into justice and silence into fire. It wasn't his ending, it was mine, and it begins here. Before everything collapsed, before betrayal carved its name into my heart, there was peace. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And sometimes, that's all you really need. A little bit of joy, a little bit of hope, and the belief that tomorrow will be brighter than today. Back then, I had dreams, simple ones, not riches, not power, not anything grand, just a home filled with laughter, friendships built on trust and love that felt unshakable. And for a while, I thought I had all of it. The mornings were my favorite. The sunlight would slip through my window, soft and golden. Like it had been painted just for me. I'd wake up, stretch, and feel that quiet comfort, that safety of knowing the world wasn't against me. He was there, too, the person I trusted more than anyone, the one who looked into my eyes and told me I wasn't alone. We shared coffee in silence, sometimes laughter, sometimes plans for the future. We talked about things we wanted to do, places we wanted to see, the kind of life we wanted to build, and foolishly, I believed every word. Isn't it strange how the little moments feel so ordinary at first? A walk in the park, a late-night conversation under the stars, a promise whispered softly in the dark. They don't seem like much, until they become memories, until you look back and realize those were the moments that defined your trust. Those were the moments that made betrayal possible. Because betrayal cannot exist without trust, and I trusted him completely. My friends used to tell me I had the kind of heart that saw good in everyone. They said it was beautiful. and dangerous, but I didn't listen. How could I? When the person standing beside me seemed so genuine, so real, so devoted. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that makes you want to believe, and so I did. I let down every wall. I gave him everything, my time, my loyalty, my love. I built my world around him, brick by brick, never once imagining that he was already holding the hammer to tear it all down. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you I was happy, truly happy. I had people who cared for me. I had dreams within reach. I had laughter echoing through my days and comfort warming my nights. There was no storm on the horizon, at least none I could see, but storms don't always show themselves. Sometimes they hide behind clear skies, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One night, I remember sitting with him in the quiet of our little world. The air smelled of rain, and there was a calmness that felt almost unreal. I leaned against him and whispered a thought I had kept to myself for a long time. I don't need much in this life. As long as I have trust, I have everything. And he smiled. He held my hand tighter, kissed my forehead, and whispered back, "You'll always have me. Always." I closed my eyes then, believing him. How could I not? The warmth in his voice, the softness in his touch, the certainty in his words. It felt unshakable, like the kind of promise carved into stone. But little did I know. The stone was already cracking, the promise was already breaking. Looking back, I see it now, the small signs, the moments when his eyes lingered elsewhere, the silences that stretched too long, the smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. But back then, I ignored them, because love, when it's pure and blind, has a way of silencing doubts. And I silenced mine. Again and again, those days, those nights, that fragile happiness. They were the calm before the storm, the quiet chapter before the betrayal, the sweetness that would one day turn bitter in my mouth, but I didn't know it yet. All I knew was that I was happy. All I knew was that I was safe. All I knew was that the person I trusted most would never hurt me, or so I thought. Because in every story of betrayal, there is a moment where trust still exists, where love still breathes, where the victim still believes in the illusion. And this was mine. The chapter where my heart was whole. My guard was down and my world was painted in soft, golden light, but light can't last forever. Shadows always wait their turn, and soon the storm would arrive. At first it was nothing, or at least it seemed like nothing. You know those moments when something feels off but you can't explain why. A look that lingers too long, a silence where words should be, a smile that feels forced. I noticed them, tiny shadows flickering in the light of what I thought was love. But instead of questioning them, I told myself what we all tell ourselves in the beginning. It's nothing. I'm imagining things. He would never hurt me. It began with small changes. His phone, once left carelessly on the table, unlocked, forgotten, now never left his side. Every buzz, every notification, he would glance at it quickly, then flip it face down, as if the screen carried secrets that weren't meant for my eyes. I laughed about it once. "What are you hiding from me? A surprise, maybe?" I tried to make it a joke, lighthearted, but the way he looked at me, sharp, almost defensive, made my laughter die in my throat. He smiled after, of course. A quick cover-up. "Don't be silly." There's nothing, and I believed him, or rather, I chose to. Late nights started to stretch longer. Before he would hurry home, eager to tell me about his day, eager to share the little stories that only mattered because they came from him. But now, his excuses grew. Work ran late. I was with some friends, you wouldn't know them. His words sounded ordinary, harmless, but his eyes never matched them. They darted away, restless, as if they were searching for an escape from my questions. I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what love does, doesn't it? It blinds you to the truth, and I was blind, so blind. There were whispers, too. Friends, neighbors, people who thought they were helping, or maybe just feeding on gossip. Little hints dropped in casual tones. He seems different lately. I saw him somewhere last week, but he didn't mention it to you. I'd laugh nervously, brush it off, defend him even when I wasn't sure why. You must be mistaken. He's just been busy. But inside, a seed of doubt began to take root. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I could feel it growing. One evening, I remember waiting. The clock ticked past midnight, my phone silent, my heart restless. Every sound outside made me hope it was him, until disappointment returned again and again. When he finally walked through the door, he smelled of cologne, but not the one he always wore. It was different. New, a scent I didn't recognize. "Where were you?" I asked softly. He smiled too quickly. "Just out." "Don't worry about it, don't worry." 2 words that never comfort, only conceal. But I told myself to believe him. Because the alternative, around the thought of betrayal, was too painful to face. And then came the lies. Small, careless lies, ones he probably thought I'd never notice. He said he was with a friend, but that friend called me the next day asking where he'd been. He said he had a late meeting, but his office confirmed they'd closed hours earlier. Each lie was like a crack in glass. Small, almost invisible at first, but with every new one the crack spread wider, deeper, threatening to shatter everything I thought we were. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tear the truth out of him no matter how much it hurt. But when the moment came, I stayed silent because fear of losing him, fear of being right about my suspicions, fear of facing the storm. It chained me. So I smiled, I pretended. I told myself lies to cover his. He's tired. He's stressed. He loves me. He would never betray me. But deep inside, I knew the storm was coming. One night I couldn't sleep. I rolled over, watching him as he slept peacefully beside me. His face looked calm, innocent even, as if the secrets he carried vanished the moment he closed his eyes. I wanted so badly to believe in that face, to believe in the warmth of his hand resting near mine, to believe that I wasn't building a life on foundations already cracking. But as I lay there staring at him, a thought whispered through my mind, a thought I couldn't silence anymore. What if I don't know him at all? That was the first time I truly felt it. The shift, the unease, the storm cloud forming at the edges of my perfect sky. The first time I realized that love can be blind. But suspicion never sleeps. And though I tried to bury it, though I tried to hold on to the image of the man I thought I knew, the truth was already clawing its way to the surface because betrayal never comes all at once. It arrives in fragments, in whispers, in lies dressed as excuses, and those first cracks were only the beginning. It happened on a night I'll never forget, the kind of night where silence feels too heavy, too unnatural, like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I had grown used to the lies, the excuses, the shifting eyes. I told myself again and again, it's fine. He loves me. I'm overthinking. But deep down I knew. And on that night, the truth finally came crashing down. He told me he had to work late again. That same tired excuse. I smiled, nodded, pretended to believe him. But something in my chest whispered, follow him. At first I resisted. I didn't want to know because once you know the truth, there's no going back. But that whisper wouldn't let me go. So I picked up my coat, stepped into the cold night, and followed. The streets were quiet. My footsteps felt too loud, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I stayed far enough behind, terrified he might turn and see me, yet desperate to see where he was going. And then, I saw it. Not the office building, not a group of friends, not the life he had promised me. Instead, it was her, standing there in the glow of the streetlights, smiling at him in a way that used to belong to me, her hand brushing against his laughter, the laughter I once thought was mine alone. It was like watching my world split in half. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the ground had vanished beneath me, and I was falling into a darkness that had no end. I wanted to scream his name, to run to him, to demand an answer, but the words froze in my throat. Instead, I stood there in the shadows, watching my worst fear become real right before my eyes. He wasn't working late. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't mine. He was hers. Every memory we had together replayed in my mind, twisting into something ugly. The mornings with coffee, the promises whispered at night, the soft, always he had once given me. Lies. All of it. Just lies, wrapped in pretty words. My chest burned. My eyes blurred with tears. But the worst part wasn't just what I saw. It was how easily he smiled, how effortlessly he betrayed me, as if I had never mattered at all. I stumbled home that night in silence, my body moving but my soul left behind. Every step felt heavier, every breath like glass in my lungs. When I closed the door behind me, I collapsed. The tears came fast, unstoppable. A flood I had been holding back for too long. I cried until my throat was raw, until my body shook, until there was nothing left inside me but emptiness. Have you ever loved someone so much that when they betray you, it feels like they've stolen a piece of your soul? That was me, shattered. The days after were worse. I confronted him, or at least, I tried when I asked. His face hardened, his voice sharp. Defensive, you're overreacting. It's not what it looked like. Why are you spying on me? Not once did he deny her. Not once did he say, I love you and only you. Instead, he made me feel like the villain, as if my pain was an inconvenience, as if my heartbreak was nothing compared to the weight of his lies. That's when the anger came. Slow at first, then rising like fire, hotter and hotter until it consumed me. I replayed it all. The secrecy, the excuses, the coldness, the way he twisted my questions into accusations against me. I had given him everything, and he gave me nothing but betrayal. How dare he? How dare he steal my trust, my love, my future, and hand it to someone else as if I were disposable? My sadness began to turn into something sharper, something stronger. Because the thing about being broken is that eventually the pieces cut back. Still, the disbelief lingered. Even after the truth was undeniable, a part of me whispered, maybe he'll change. Maybe he'll come back. Maybe he'll realize what he's losing. But deep down, I knew better. People who betray you once will betray you again. And no amount of love, no amount of forgiveness, can glue together a heart that was shattered by lies. I remember looking in the mirror one morning, my eyes swollen from nights of crying, my face pale, my spirit weak. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. The light was gone. The person who had trusted, who had loved without fear, she was gone. In that reflection, I saw two choices. Stay broken, or rebuild. Stay silent, or rise. And in that moment, a spark lit inside me, a spark I didn't even know I had. It was quiet, small, almost invisible. But it was there. And that spark was the beginning of revenge, because the breaking point doesn't just end a story, it begins a new one, and mine was only just starting. When betrayal hits, it doesn't stop at your heart. It spreads, it seeps into every corner of your life, poisoning the air you breathe, the way people look at you, the way you look at yourself. The days after the truth came out were the darkest I've ever known. At first, there was silence, the kind of silence that wraps around you like a suffocating blanket. He avoided me, kept his distance, acted as if I were invisible. The person who once couldn't go a day without hearing my voice now treated me like a stranger. Like I was nothing. I kept asking myself, was it me? Was I not enough? Did I deserve this? Those questions haunted me, clawing at my sanity, and then came the whispers. People talk. They always do. Neighbors, friends, even those who called themselves family. Suddenly they all had something to say. Did you hear? She wasn't enough for him. I always thought he deserved better. Poor thing. She should have known. They didn't whisper softly enough. I heard them. I felt their eyes on me, sharp and pitying, cutting me down more than words ever could. Everywhere I went, I felt the humiliation, the stares, the smirks, the laughter that wasn't spoken out loud but lived in the corner of people's eyes. I wanted to scream, to tell them they didn't know the full story, that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't the fool they painted me to be, but my voice was gone, broken. So, I stayed silent, and silence only made me look more defeated. Nights were the hardest. The bed felt colder. The walls seemed to close in tighter. Memories attacked me like knives. His laughter, his promises, his touch. And then the image of him with her, smiling like I never existed. I cried until there were no tears left. And then I sat in the dark, empty, staring into nothing. For a moment, I thought of giving up, not just on him, not just on love, but on myself. Because when the person you trusted most betrays you, it feels like they've stolen not only your heart, but your reflection. I couldn't see myself anymore. But here's the strange thing about pain. When it gets too heavy, when it breaks you beyond recognition, something else begins to stir beneath it. Something raw. Something dangerous. One night, as I sat in that darkness, I whispered to myself, "Why am I the one hiding? Why am I the one broken? He betrayed me, not the other way around." For the first time, the shame began to shift. The humiliation began to burn, not against me, but against him. I realized something important that night. He had taken my love, my trust, my peace, but there was one thing he hadn't taken: my will. At first, it was just a thought, a fleeting spark, easy to dismiss. What if I made him regret it? What if I showed him I wasn't the weak, broken person he thought I was? The thought grew. Day by day it grew stronger, louder, bolder. It wasn't about hurting him the way he hurt me. It was about reclaiming myself, reclaiming the voice he had stolen, the confidence he had shattered, the dignity he had tried to bury. But revenge isn't born in fire alone. It's forged in silence, in patience, in the careful rebuilding of the self. I started small. I stopped hiding. I walked into the world again. Even when the whispers followed me, even when the smirks cut into me, I looked people in the eye, even when it hurt. And every time I did, the spark grew brighter. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in a shop window. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see a victim staring back. I saw someone wounded, yes, but I also saw someone alive, someone dangerous, someone who had nothing left to lose. And that's when it hit me. If he thought my story was over, he was wrong, because the aftermath wasn't my ending, it was my beginning. That night, I whispered to myself again, he may have betrayed me, but I will decide how this story ends. And with those words, the spark of revenge turned into a flame that would guide me, a flame that would consume the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, and leave me stronger than ever before, because betrayal may break you. It may leave you in ashes, but from ashes rises fire, and I was ready to burn. When the spark turned into a flame, I knew I couldn't rush it. Revenge that's loud and hasty is easily crushed. The elegant kind is slow, a patient, surgical undoing that leaves no room for excuses. So I began to plan. Quietly, carefully, like setting pieces on a chessboard. First, I gathered facts. Not because I wanted to prove I was right, I already knew that, but because truth, when organized, becomes a weapon no lie can stand against. I reread old messages, not out of obsession, but to notice patterns. I kept a small notebook with dates, places, little contradictions. A slipped comment there, a missed meeting here. Names that repeated, times that didn't match. I didn't record private conversations or break the law to get proof. I collected what existed already. Screenshots he'd left open, receipts he couldn't explain, texts a careless partner forwarded to the wrong person. Honest things, petty things, the kind of details that add up and make denials impossible. Next, I rebuilt my allies. When betrayal happens, some people flee, but others stay. And new people appear if you make room for them. I reached out to coworkers, old friends, neighbors I had once ignored. Not with pleading, but with calm honesty. I listened more than I spoke. I learned who had seen what, who'd been hurt in small ways by the same person, who could corroborate a timeline. Little by little, my network grew into a quiet line of witnesses. Then I reclaimed my image. People remember the version of you show them, and for months I had allowed him to shape that story. No more, I started showing up, not for him but for me. I took small public steps. A coffee with someone influential in my field, a short volunteer shift, a smile that wasn't desperate but deliberate. It was a subtle signal. I wasn't a ruined casualty to be whispered about. I was a person walking back into the light, but the best moves were the invisible ones. I learned his routines not by spying but by observing. The places he frequented, the friends he named when he lied, the little rituals he performed that revealed more than his words ever did. I had patience now. If he wanted to lie, he'd give me the lies on a platter. I only had to be ready to collect them. I wrote letters I never sent. I drafted conversations I would never have. These pages helped me sharpen my thoughts. They turned raw, bleeding emotion into crisp sentences and strategies. I transformed anger into plans. Where my heart had been a storm, I made it into a map. One clever move was to let him underestimate the change. I acted slower than I felt. I smiled at his jokes. I even played the part of the wounded ex to his satisfaction. Not because I wanted him to feel superior, but because when he assumed I was harmless, he became careless. Pride is a powerful blindfold. That arrogance became my ally. I also exploited timeline logic. Public appearances, receipts, photos with timestamps, ordinary things that reveal extraordinary truths when pieced together. I didn't fabricate anything. I assembled reality so clearly that it would cut through his defenses. A lunch he claimed to be at work, a photo he'd liked at midnight, a message thread showing two different stories. Each little fact was a shard. Alone harmless. Together they became glass. There were legal, ethical levers too. Formal complaints, HR conversations, polite but firm emails. I learned how to ask questions that forced answers into record. When someone claims you're paranoid, written words push them into accountability. I wasn't out for ruin. I wanted truth. But truth in ink is hard to bend. I rehearsed timing the way an actor rehearses lines. Every reveal had to land when the audience's attention was highest. A shared event, a moment where his lies would be exposed by context, not by my accusation. I planned small public clarifications at times when his denials would not hold. People remember scenes more than speeches. I built scenes and I guarded my heart. This was a long game. There were days I felt the old sting and wanted to lash out publicly, to tear down everything in a fit of righteous fury. I resisted. The smaller eruptions would have been satisfying for a night, but disastrous for the story I intended to write. So I practiced restraint. I breathed. I let the plan do the work. I practiced psychological patience too. Little acts of reclaiming dignity mattered, showing up to places I had once avoided, answering calls without trembling, laughing with people who made me feel human again. Each small victory fed the plan. It was a domino effect. Confidence toppled self-pity. There were moments of temptation when I wanted to humiliate him publicly. But humiliation is cheap. The true sting of consequence is respect reclaimed, opportunities lost, the quiet collapse of a life built on lies. I wanted him to feel that loss, not through petty revenge, but through consequence. I wanted him to watch me rise while realizing, too late, what he had given away. So I prepared the reveal like a crescendo. Quiet initial notes building, layering until the melody was unavoidable. I lined up witnesses. I organized documents. I polished my presence so that when the moment came, I would not be the woman everyone pitied, but the one who stood with dignity and facts. There were small psychological tricks. Timing a polite message when he expected a weak reply. Responding with calm questions when he sought drama. Letting friends ask him the awkward things he refused to answer. I let natural curiosity become a mirror, reflecting his inconsistencies back at him. People are more likely to believe what they discover for themselves than what they are told. My plan used that truth over and over, and then, because life is mercifully dramatic, I created opportunities for his mistakes. I didn't plant traps. I created situations where a liar's truth would slip out. A group chat where someone forwarded the wrong photo, an unplanned encounter where he'd be forced to explain himself. A calendar invite left visible. He made the openings. I simply kept my eyes open. The entire plan had one moral axis: expose the lies without becoming a liar myself. I wanted to be accountable to the truth, not to my anger. That kept me steady. It kept me from crossing lines I would regret, and from becoming the very thing I despised. When the day I had in mind finally edged near, there was a strange nervousness that felt nothing like fear. It was more like the hush before an audience rises to their feet. I wasn't acting out of cruelty. I was finishing a tale that had been stolen from me. I had taken the years of trust and turned them into clarity. I had turned humiliation into discipline. I had turned private pain into public proof, and all the while, I held to one small but dangerous truth. The best revenge is not to make him suffer unnecessarily. but to make him understand the weight of what he threw away, to let him realize in the quiet after the reveal that he had traded something real for a temporary thrill. That realization, more than any shouting or social ruin, would be the kind of punishment that burrows into a person's bones. That was what I wanted. Justice in the form of truth and restoration, not spectacle. So I waited. Patience wasn't passive. It was active. It was the most precise kind of power. And as I stood at the edge of execution, every small piece in place, I felt something close to calm. Not because the plan guaranteed success, nothing in life does, but because I had rebuilt myself while I built the plan. Either outcome would leave me different from the woman who had followed him in the middle of the night. That knowledge steadied me. Now, with the chessboard set and the pieces ready to move, the only thing left was to take the first step. The moment of action felt quieter than I expected. All the rehearsals, the careful assembling of facts, the patient waiting, they condensed into a single, steady breath. Revenge, I had learned, was not a shout. It was a sequence of small, undeniable truths delivered with calm. That was the sound that would break him. At first, he acted exactly as I'd predicted, safe, arrogant, untouchable. He laughed at the whispers. He posted carefree photos with the same careless confidence he'd always worn. He mocked the idea that anyone would hold him accountable. In his world, charisma and charm were shields, and he believed them to be impenetrable. So I let him wear that armor while I set the pieces in motion. The first move was public, but subtle. A question from a friend in a casual setting. One that sounded innocent but carried weight. It was asked without drama. Just a curious conversational nudge. He answered with the old reflexive charm, but his answer didn't line up with the receipts I'd quietly placed where they would be noticed. People noticed the mismatch. Conversation shifted. Curiosity turned into suspicion. Next came the photographs. I didn't brandish them like a weapon. I allowed them to surface naturally. A colleague forwarded a photo he'd liked in a group chat, a timestamp, a location that contradicted his convenient story. The photo itself didn't accuse him. It simply showed what it showed. In a room full of people, context began to form, and context is hard to deny. Then the texts. Not dramatic leaks, not stolen treasures, but ordinary messages left where they might be seen. A forgotten phone on a cafe table, a thread that popped up on a shared screen. These slips were small human errors he would have dismissed in his arrogance. Each one I quietly documented, each one another nail in the lid of his denials. I remember watching him that week at a dinner. His smile too easy, his laugh louder than it needed to be. He noticed eyes on him, and I saw the flash of something like worry cross his face. It was brief, almost nothing, but it told me my moves were working. The arrogance that had once insulated him was already becoming brittle. I used witnesses, not vendettas. People prefer to believe what they see for themselves, so I let his circle discover inconsistencies without me having to point them out. A coworker who had suspected something came forward, not to rage at him but to ask clarifying questions. Under gentle pressure, explanations faltered. Stories contradicted. His prickly charm couldn't hold the shape of truth. There was a moment when he tried to gaslight the narrative, to twist the facts into a different shape. He called me names in private messages, tried to shame me, accused me of making mountains out of molehills. He expected the drama to rattle me, to make me apologize or disappear. Instead, I archived everything. Words can be exposures too. Screenshots make liars quieter. One of the most satisfying moments was simple and practical. A calendar invite he'd shown as a work engagement had a different name attached. A brunch that would have explained away a lie if only he had told the truth. I let that invite circulate in the right circles. It was mundane. It was perfect. It proved that reality and his rehearsed lines were living in two different rooms. There was also the HR conversation. I walked in with nothing resembling rage, only a composed presentation of facts. No melodrama, no theatrics. I handed over timelines, screenshots, corroborated statements. HR asked questions he couldn't answer without his stories collapsing. He tried the old tactics, charm, deflection, blaming others. But the evidence was methodical and patient and clinical. It didn't care for his performance. What surprised me was how quickly people who had stood at a distance began to close in, not to gloat but to make sense of the pattern I'd exposed. Colleagues who once avoided controversy quietly thanked me for bringing clarity. Friends who had been unsure now spoke to me in low, sincere tones. The isolation that had been my prison began to crack. He reacted as people do when the ground shifts under their feet, with anger and disbelief. He confronted me publicly one afternoon, his voice loud, trying to flip the script and make me the accuser again. I stood calm. I repeated exact times, dates, and statements. I let his words hang in the air. He sputtered. He searched for allies. Some of them, embarrassed, looked away. His pride could not withstand the slow work of truth. He tried to rally, to salvage his image with theatrics and explanations that required too much faith to hold. The more he fought, the more apparent his inconsistencies became. People sensed the difference between performance and proof. Charm is quick. Evidence lingers. The unraveling wasn't a single blow. It was a succession of small clarifications. A friend asking a pointed follow-up, a social media comment that exposed a timeline error, a text message that didn't match up with his public statements. Each was a calculated nudge, invisible enough to look accidental but intentional enough to be effective. And then, one evening at a gathering where he'd expected to be praised and untouchable, someone quietly mentioned a name that didn't belong in his story. It wasn't an exposé. It was a recollection, a memory shared in passing. The room slowed. The laughter died. He searched faces for support and found silence. For once, there was no laugh to cover the crack. I watched him crumple not because I wanted to watch him fall, but because justice in its purest form is not spectacle. It's consequence. He had spent so long believing his charisma made him immune, but charisma doesn't alter facts. It doesn't rewrite timestamps or erase messages. It simply distracts. And once the distraction falls away, truth stands in the light like a cold, unrelenting mirror. When it was over, or rather, when the first wave of consequence had done its work, there was no victory dance from me. The satisfaction was quieter than I imagined. It was a deep and steady breathing out, like someone who has been underwater surfacing and tasting air again. He felt exposed. I felt seen. That night I did something small and human. I sat alone with a cup of tea and let the silence hold me. The plan had worked. The lies had been unspooled. Yet the point was never to watch him burn. It was to call back my life from the edges he'd pushed it to. Revenge in practice had been less like sabotage and more like unmasking. It was the patient assembly of truth, the orchestration of context, the quiet courage to stand composed in front of those facts. It was, above all, a reclaiming of dignity, of voice, of story. And though his power had been unstitched, the story was not yet finished. There was one last scene to write, one final moment where he would have to face what he'd lost, not in a showy collapse, but in a silence that would speak louder than any shout. He thought it was over. He thought he had survived the storm I unleashed. Yes, some lies had been exposed. Yes, his reputation had taken small dents. But in his mind, he still stood tall. In his world, appearances mattered more than truth, and he believed appearances were still his to control. So he laughed. He celebrated. He wore the same smug smile he had always used to silence doubts and disarm suspicion. To him, the chess game was finished. To me, the board was only now entering its final move. I let him believe he had won. That false sense of victory was the sweetest setup for what came next. He strutted into rooms, joking that rumors never last, shaking hands, throwing around his charm. He believed people had moved on, but what he didn't realize was that I had been saving the final piece all along. It wasn't a weapon of anger. It wasn't even about humiliating him in public. It was something sharper, deeper, more permanent. It was truth, unveiled in a way he could not deny, could not spin, and could not laugh away. The moment came on a day of his choosing, not mine. He had planned a gathering, a chance to show the world he was still untouchable. The room was full of familiar faces, friends, colleagues, people he had always relied on to back his version of events. He smiled, lifted his glass, and made jokes at my expense, confident that I was somewhere far away, licking old wounds. But I was there, not as the wounded shadow he remembered, but as someone transformed, calm, steady, unshaken. When our eyes met across the room, I saw it, that flicker of unease he tried to bury beneath a grin. He hadn't expected me to stand there. Not tonight, not ever again, and then the twist began to unfold. Piece by piece, the evidence I had collected found its way into the open, not through an angry outburst, but through calm, undeniable revelation. A misplaced date here, a screenshot shared casually there, a witness stepping forward with quiet authority. The web unraveled in front of him. Every boast he had made, every smug story he had told, collapsed under the weight of his own contradictions. The room shifted. Laughter dimmed. Faces turned. Not toward me in pity, but toward him in shock. I said almost nothing. I didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than my voice ever could. He tried desperately to talk his way out of it. He joked, he denied. He raised his voice. But the more he fought, the clearer it became. The emperor had no clothes. And then I delivered the final reversal. Not in rage, not in cruelty, but in calm. Cutting truth, I looked at him, my voice steady, and I said the words he never thought he'd hear. The ending. "'Tis not belong to you, it never did, it belongs to me." Silence fell. He stood frozen, his grin cracking, his pride unraveling. For the first time he saw it. The story was no longer his to control. That was the moment everything shifted. The laughter stopped. The applause he had expected turned to silence. And in that silence, his power crumbled, because the ultimate revenge was never about destroying him. It was about reclaiming me, and in that moment he finally understood. The ending was not his triumph. It was my victory. The storm had passed. For so long, my life had felt like chaos, like thunder crashing over my head, like waves dragging me under, like I was fighting for air that never seemed to come. But now, there was silence. Not empty silence, not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of peace. The betrayer was no longer the towering figure he once appeared to be. He was exposed, powerless, stripped of the illusions he had used to control others. The mask had cracked, and behind it, there was nothing left to admire. Nothing left to fear. For the first time I saw him clearly, not as the monster who had destroyed my life, but as a small, fragile man, broken by his own choices. And in that clarity I realized something. I didn't need to hate him anymore. Hatred had fueled my revenge, yes. It had carried me through the darkest nights, but now, it had no place in me, because I had won. Not in the way he once measured winning, with applause, with charm, with manipulation. My victory was quieter, deeper. It was in the way people now looked at me with respect instead of pity. It was in the way truth had triumphed over lies. It was in the way I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, until I was stronger than I had ever been. I stood tall, not destroyed but reborn. Where once I had been broken, now I was whole. Where once I had been humiliated, now I carried dignity. Where once I had been silenced, now I had a voice that no one could take from me again. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about renewal. The betrayal had nearly crushed me, but in surviving it, I had discovered strength I never knew I had. I had learned patience. I had learned discipline. I had learned that the truest form of justice isn't in shouting louder than the one who wronged you. It's in standing calmly, unshaken, while their lies collapse around them. And so, as I walked away from that final confrontation, I felt no need to look back. His story was no longer mine to carry. His downfall was not my burden. Had written my own ending. And it wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning of a new life where betrayal no longer defined me. A beginning where I was not the victim, not even just the survivor, but the author of my own story. And if there's one lesson I carry from all of it, it is this. People may betray you, lies may break you, and storms may shake you, but nothing can destroy you if you choose to rise again. The betrayer was gone, his power dissolved into shadows. And me? I was still here, stronger, wiser, unbroken. The story was over. But my life was only just beginning. When the dust finally settled, I looked back not with bitterness, but with clarity. For so long I thought revenge meant making him feel the same pain he had caused me. I thought it was about breaking him the way he broke me, but when the moment came, when the truth stood tall and his lies crumbled, I understood something deeper. Revenge was never about hurting him. It was about healing me. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had allowed him to take. My confidence, my dignity, my voice. It was about proving to the world, and more importantly to myself, that betrayal might wound me, but it would not define me. Here's the truth no one tells you. Betrayal feels like the end of your story. It feels like your trust, your love, your years were wasted. But if you endure, if you rise, you discover something extraordinary. Betrayal can also be the beginning. Because when someone tears away the foundation you thought you needed, you learn to build on something stronger, yourself. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Revenge is not about destruction. It's about reclamation. It's about taking back your power. It's about standing tall in the ruins and saying, "You may have broken my trust, but you did not break me." And when you do that, when you rise with dignity instead of rage, the ending is no longer theirs to write. It's yours. The one who betrayed me thought he had taken everything. But in the end, he gave me something he never intended, the chance to discover the strength I never knew I had. And that is the real victory. Not revenge that destroys, but revenge that transforms.